When was the last time you did something for the first time? Discovered water that was 20 shades of blue. Where a butler served you cocktails on a beach.
Like many other Americans, before coming to the Caribbean, many of my perspectives on the islands were limited to the visual representations that I saw in advertisements and television. Commercials like these by Sandals Resort were the extent of my knowledge, as promises of white sandy beaches and picturesque tropics were all that I was exposed to. However, because of my experiences living in Barbados and having had access to the education that I have in the past few months, many of my perspectives on the West Indies have changed. Recently, I went on a trip to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In this video, I will discuss a few of the things that I was exposed to during my vacation that I most likely would not have noticed or understood the significance of were I another tourist, coming into the islands with little education on the culture and history of the Caribbean. While visiting the mainland of St. Vincent, we learned about the importation of white sand at one particular beach by the Buckingham Bay Resort. Our taxi driver informed us that there was a protest at the same beach in the week prior because of the move to privatize it, preventing locals from using it. There is no doubt that these moves by the Buckingham Bay Resort were a part of the quest to market the island as a pristine tropical paradise. However, according to a 2018 article from The Guardian on the importation of sand dredging degrades corals, seaweeds, and seagrass meadows, and is a driver of biodiversity loss, threatening species already on the verge of extinction. Not only then is the importation of sand harmful to the environment, but it also takes away from St. Vincent's natural beauty and history. A volcanic island, the island of St. Vincent is full of black sand beaches. We visited this one with our taxi driver at the Wallabu National Park. Our driver showed us how this river was damaged by a recent volcanic eruption in April 2021 and talked about how she grew up visiting it with her parents. In the opening essay of her work, Consuming the Caribbean, From Arawaks to Zombies, Mimi Scheller argues that the ways in which the lands of the Caribbean are both marketed and treated as limitless, and that they are not susceptible to permanent damage, is a part of the neocolonial domination which plagues the Caribbean today. Scheller tracks how the idea of the Caribbean has been constructed in European imagery and for the Western tourist. As local people are presumed incapable of capitalizing on natural resources, it is then justified by Americans and other Westerners to build resorts and privatize beaches, despite the impacts that these actions have on the land and the local people. On this trip, I was able to visit the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Botanic Gardens, located in Kingston. The oldest botanical gardens in the Western Hemisphere, these historic gardens were established in 1765 by Scottish General Robert Melville. In these gardens, my friends and I learned about many traditional plants, including both ones brought over by European colonists and ones native to the land. These plants have had a wide range of uses for natives, from filing nails to terminating pregnancies, and everything in between. However, the origins of the garden were not as innocent as simply preserving the plants of the land, as the exploration of indigenous plants instead largely served to cultivate the export markets for Europeans overseas. This is a part of a larger history which Mimi Scheller discusses in the same essay from Consuming the Caribbean. Tropical products including spices, medicines, foods, ornamental woods, and various other plants were shipped across the Atlantic. Scheller refers to the lists of natural products that 18th century Europeans incorporated from the tropics as part of a rhetoric of inquisition. This all encouraged the narrative of consumption which has surrounded the West Indies, as not only then were those who traveled there enjoying its benefits, but so too were populations overseas. In her essay, Scheller refers to this as a new genre of colonialism, as the obsession with acquiring new resources from the islands of the Caribbean spoke to the period's obsession with imperialist acquisition. Now I'm going to change course to briefly discuss some of the complicated history of race in the Caribbean. This is definitely off topic from the rest of the video, but I found this too interesting not to discuss. When visiting St. Mary's Cathedral in Kingston, a Catholic church which was first erected in 1823, I noticed that in the Stations of the Cross on the walls of the church, Jesus is depicted as white, despite everyone else being depicted as black. Interestingly, this includes the Virgin Mary, his own mother, being depicted as black. These depictions did not go unnoticed by me, as it brought to mind the film Ava and Gabriel, a love story. In this film, which takes place in Curacao in the late 1940s, an artist named Gabriel seeks to paint the Virgin Mary as a black woman, but faces extensive backlash for doing so. The ideals of race, nationalism, and identity are all significant to this presentation of Mary's skin color, as the adoption of a Dutch identity by Curacao has been significant to the island's history. Color has played a significant role in its relation to class in Curacao and elsewhere in the West Indies, and the image of a black messiah has had an extensive history in the Caribbean. But as the film portrays, there has been a pushback in the Caribbean to depict holy figures, including Jesus, as black. In his lecture, Race, Class, and Ethnicity, A Caribbean Interpretation, Lloyd Best discusses the unique complexity of the Caribbean, as the plantations imposed a specific class system, and the diverse racial makeup of the West Indies has complicated the question of ethnicity. I believe that Best's lecture applies here because it portrays how deeply ingrained in the history of the Caribbean issues of race and class are. As these two factors have been so intertwined, it is no wonder that the implications of portraying a holy figure in a certain skin tone are so significant. I feel that these Stations of the Cross definitely speak to the colorism that has existed, especially as Jesus is the only figure not depicted as black. Although this was a small detail in the grand scheme of the historic and awe-inspiring cathedral, it has significant roots in the history of the Caribbean.
Blanke Maria is toch traditie in de kerk?
Maar monseigneur, de tijd bepaalt toch wat traditie is en wat niet?
Deze kwestie is reeds zo geseculariseerd en in het politieke veld getrokken dat ik ernstige twijfels heb.
Knowing what I know now, it's interesting to see how the islands of the Caribbean market themselves to visitors. One needs to look no further than a gift shop to understand how Barbados markets itself as a slow-paced or chill vacation spot. But like the rest of the Caribbean, it is so much more than that. In her essay Gazing Outwards and Looking Back, Roshini Kempadu discusses the visual culture which surrounds the Caribbean, or how it is marketed to perpetuate a specific aesthetic. She says Caribbean visual culture has always been inherently intertwined with corporate capital, global promotional culture, and branding of the Caribbean area. Through this essay, Kempadu presents the continuous need to decolonize the West Indies beyond their independence. I believe that changing the ways in which we as visitors experience the Caribbean and Caribbean culture is a positive step in the right direction.
Keeps